And now things have come back around to your home state of Florida, your adopted home state in Florida. We have some interesting gun news coming out of there in the shape of a special session for the legislature that may include constitutional carry or permitless carry. The governor, Ron DeSantis, a Republican, said that, well, first of all, he vetoed the congressional map, and that's why they have to have a special session. But when he was asked about other issues that might come up or other things he might want to see the legislature do, he included constitutional carry among a couple other policies in his comments. So I'm interested, Charles, you've written about this over at The Corner, National Review, and I want to know what your take is. Where do you see this going? How do you see it coming out?
Well, there has been a bit of a shift in DeSantis' rhetoric. This was never a big issue for him. He has always had an A rating from the NRA, and he's been pro-Second Amendment throughout his entire career. But constitutional carry was not something he talked about until recently. I don't know whether the change has been something he sensed in the legislature, or it's because it's an election year, he's running for re-election in November, or because he might want to be president one day. But in March, he said that if the bill came to his desk, he would sign it. And people got all excited, but the session was already effectively over, and so it languished and died nevertheless. And the reason people are talking about this again, as you note, is because of this special session. Now, the special session ostensibly is to deal with the redistricting map. But when talking to reporters the other day, DeSantis said, there's a whole load of stuff I'd like to get done. He mentioned property insurance, which has become a problem recently in Florida. And he mentioned constitutional carry. He obviously can't force the legislature to do this. But he could plausibly use them as a bargaining chip. If he wants to give a bit, maybe he could ask for something, and constitutional carry would be an option. And then, and we'll come on to this too, there's always the possibility that he's beginning to lay the groundwork for this now, so that it is picked up by members of the legislature, worked on while the legislature is out of session. Florida's legislature only meets for 60 days a year. And then if there are more Republicans in that legislature next year, which given the national climate and the climate in Florida seems possible, then maybe he assumes it would go through then.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think noting his sort of attitude towards constitutional carry is important here because, yeah, he made those comments back in March where he said he would sign it if it made it to his desk, right? Which is obviously pretty different than saying he's going to push for it or leverage, use his political influence to get it passed. And then at the same time, those comments were made at a fundraiser where a gun rights activist had sort of come in for a picture, or what I think DeSantis thought was a picture, but it was actually a video, and then asked him this question, and he reacted with a sort of course I would support that. But so he kind of got almost pushed into it. And then even at this press conference about the special session, he was asked what else he'd like to see. And he said, well, I'd like to see these different policies, but the legislature didn't get them passed in regular session, and he didn't seem to think they were going to get them passed in special session either. So I do wonder how much actual momentum there's going to be inside of the legislature during the special session to get permitless carry, constitutional carry passed.
Yeah, so Florida's a strange state in this regard, in that it has a permitting system that is popular, not just in the state of Florida, but outside of it. You can get a concealed carry permit for Florida from, through the mail, providing you have the training requirements, that is then good and counts in a huge number of other states. Now, there are some states that require you to be a resident of the state that is attached to reciprocity, but a lot of states don't. So if, for example, you live in Connecticut, as I used to, and you want reciprocity with a whole bunch of other concealed carry states that don't recognize Connecticut, you can get a Florida concealed carry permit. Now, the reason I bring this up is that makes Florida quite a lot of money because there are
Yes.
millions of Florida concealed carry permits, and in a state with no income tax, you have to raise money somehow. And I've long thought that maybe Florida had held on to its permitting process because it's lucrative. The minute that you get rid of your permits, then you get rid of your renewal fees and application fees. And when you get rid of your application fees, then there's no money coming in at all. I like that because I think that it makes a constitutional right easier to utilize. But I can understand why the state government might say, well, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Of course, what's changed since Florida contrived its shall issue permitting system and its generous reciprocity rules is that we're now at almost half of states in America with constitutional carry. I think you said Georgia is about to become the 25th.
Yeah.
And that makes Florida look a bit weird because Florida is disparagingly referred to by gun control activists as the gunshine state. And yet it still has this older way of doing things. And I'm sure that DeSantis is aware of this. I'm sure that Republicans in the legislature are aware of this and they don't want to get behind the curve.
Yeah, you're absolutely going to see Georgia become the 25th state to adopt permitless carry here in the next week or two. Maybe once they're, I believe the Georgia House, at a time of filming here, had passed their final version of the bill, and it should be reconciled with the Senate, and then on to Governor Brian Kemp's desk, who's already pledged to sign it. Really, already pledged to sign it on this very podcast. But he did it before then as well. So they're going to become 25th, and then it really becomes a question of momentum and pressure for the rest of the red states that don't have permitless carry, because it's almost all of them now. Every state that has Republican control of the legislature and the governor's mansion has basically gotten on board with this policy over the last decade. It's been since Arizona passed their permitless carry. Alaska had done it, and I think it was 2003, and then obviously Vermont was the originator back in the founding for this policy, which is why some people call it Vermont carry. But now the momentum for it has just exploded within the Republican side of the aisle, and it's going to be increasingly difficult not to pass permitless carry, I think, for Republicans in these states. So somebody like Ron DeSantis, who obviously has ambitions beyond Florida's governorship, it'll be harder for him to win a primary probably if he isn't on board with this policy and doesn't get it passed, I would imagine.